Hello, welcome into the Kevin Mandeville Show, live here on YouTube every Tuesday, Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can subscribe here on the channel, give the button a smash, or go to kevinmandeville.com/newsletter. Get the shows delivered to your inbox. I'm very happy to have another guest on today's program. Let us welcome in Libby Herskovitz, Marketing Technologies Analyst from Veracode. Libby, welcome in.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining in. I'm very happy. You are the first fellow Massachusetts email geek here sort of on the program. So we got Massachusetts in the house. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like there's New York has New Yorkers, Ohio has Ohioans. I don't know what Massachusetts has. Do you know?
Massachusetts. I have no idea. No idea. We're all Bostonians, basically.
Bostonians, that's all we are. Anybody who is in Massachusetts, we're a Bostonian. That is a fact.
Yeah.
All right, so I love kicking these interviews off, just getting into your backstory. Unless you happen to be a really weird person who grew up dreaming of becoming an email marketer and designer. But how exactly did you get involved into this crazy world of the web, email, if they were different? I would love to hear how you got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved web and design. I actually learned them about the same time, starting, I think, when I was like in junior high. Got really into web and design, and they were mostly separate. And it wasn't until I got into college at Mass Art that my teachers kind of showed me that I could unify the two things and really pursue them. And then you get out of school, and you're kind of just doing whatever you can with design, and being a junior designer, learning WordPress, but also doing a bunch of other design stuff. And eventually I landed as a contractor at Monotype, which was amazing. Such a big company for designers because they sell the fonts that you've used your whole life, which is the biggest thing to us designers. And they loved my WordPress experience, so they threw me into Marketo to make landing pages and eventually emails, and really had to learn on the fly.
Yeah.
So, like Litmus became a huge tool for me, but also just the Marketo community. So, and I love a challenge. I love having to learn something brand new, and also something that's constantly changing, because I get bored because I figure stuff out and I'm like, okay, well, oh no, now this is broken again. How do I fix it? So that's kind of how I got into email and why I chose to stay in it.
That's very cool. Yes, it does take you a very unique type of person. It's a different set of problem-solving skills that I find that you have to be attracted to really love email. I find that to be a common thread. So that's really interesting. So you went to Mass Art, which is a really good design school out here in Massachusetts. I think it's interesting because in this profession, maybe more so in design, but you always see that a lot of people didn't study what they got to do professionally, but you actually had a chance to learn a lot about design. How did that help you foundationally with your career?
Oh, yeah. A big part of the education that I had was not just the fundamentals of like how to lay things out like correctly using grids and the tools and stuff, but also design thinking. So a big part of what I love to do was user experience. And that feeds really well into marketing, which I'm in, and email marketing specifically, because you're thinking about how a user is using whatever you've made. And so that dovetails really well into not only email marketing, but email operations, because I'm thinking about how is anybody going to use anything I'm putting out there and how can I track it? I didn't learn the tracking part in school, but I learned a lot about the how users use stuff, and I still get to use that thinking like all the time. So it actually worked really well. I'd say it's more like an engineer's brain, which designers are engineers without realizing it.
Yeah, they are. And I think that's interesting too. I find this to be a trend sort of in email right now. And I think a part of the industry is very tied up on the development side or being interested in all the hacks that you can do. But the design strategy, like the actual thinking behind it right now, that's missing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like you said, developers can be the ones that can help inform it. But oftentimes teams are siloed or the processes are too disjointed. So I find that to be an interesting trend. And then, talking about Marketo. I used Marketo at my first job out of school myself. So I spent a few years. Granted, this was 7-8 years ago now. But yeah,
Hasn't changed very much.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was pretty painful back then and less than enjoyable. So yeah, you really gotta love email if that's like your first foray into it. But so what was it like working at Monotype? I mean, what did you learn there? Because that's a really cool, brand to be associated with.
Yeah, they were awesome. I was there for like about almost 3 years, and I'd say for a very long time the mentality there was just like creating beautiful things for designers and making it about, how designers use what we make and what is valuable about the history of typography and fonts, and really emphasizing that. And as a huge type nerd, font nerd, I just like absolutely loved it. I loved going upstairs. They had all the archived, original drawings and all these prints and stuff. And I just totally nerded out over it. So that was amazing. And the people there were so inspirational and crazy creative and just doing crazy cool branding stuff, which I loved to be a part of. And they cared so much about the design of the email. I know you're saying like, oh yeah, developers, they inform a lot of email, but there it was like the design informed what I had to develop. And that worked for both emails and landing pages. So like when I had to make like a what font are you quiz, the design really informed how I was going to code it and how the process was going to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I have to ask, especially as you're coming from more of a design background and you are completely limitless with all of your possibilities, right? You're just this creative person. I'm going to do whatever I can. And then you come and you meet email. What kind of rude awakening was that for you in terms of how did it change your perspective on the design side and how you approach email design?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I get inspiration from limitations. It's a big reason why I love accessibility. And like a big part about why I love how accessible design is because I think the coolest design that is done in limited aspects is like the most interesting to me. So if you can do really interesting dynamic design in a really limited space that's still really successful and has a good user journey, that's like the best design to me. So I love that kind of challenge. Rather than a whiteboard with totally empty space, I can do anything. I'm like, well, give me some limitations that are a little bit tougher, and then I'm interested. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, constraint drives creativity for sure. And I use that quote all the time in email presentations to like non-email folks. So what are some of your big sources of inspiration, sort of, I guess, one, design in general, and then two, for email design inspiration? What do you look for and draw from?
Great question. Design in general, I love, I'm such a sucker for like really well thought out hierarchies with typography, but where you can really follow along with how the designer wanted you to read something and it makes total sense. It's super easy to read. I love that stuff. And it doesn't have to be sans serif. It doesn't have to be serif. It doesn't have to follow like a certain like Bauhaus style or anything like that. It really can just be like whatever makes sense for the brand that I'm reading it for. Then I love it. I'm just like, they really stayed true to themselves and they made this really easy and able to understand. So I don't have a specific place I go to. I used to go to like MailChimp or stuff like that. They rebranded recently, so that was like, it's a little bit different getting used to it, but there's stuff like that I go to all the time. And then for email design, I love stuff like Moo. I think they do a really good job, and there's some other companies out there that aren't coming to the top of my head, but they do a really good job, especially with like GIFs and keeping the style of their photography similar, and also keeping their messaging really clear and stuff like that I love.
Very cool. So what's your workflow look like today? I'd love to get into the toolings that, all the different apps and software that you use. What do you use to design emails, develop them, build them? I know you mentioned Marketo. We could probably get into that as well, but I'd love to know just what your process sort of all the way through from beginning to end looks like.
Yeah, sure. So when I'm freelancing is mostly when I'm doing like email design development. So I love To work with other users, I've used like I use InDesign a lot and some other apps like InDesign, but I'm like die hard into grids and stuff like that. So I'm always using InDesign or Illustrator or like SketchUp and stuff like that. When I used to do more of like user experience stuff, I used the InVision app just to kind of figure out what it looks like when everybody's going through stuff. And then for coding, I code from scratch, so I'm mostly just using like frameworks that I've established in the past, especially since I'm usually coding for Marketo. So I have to have like examples for things that I've worked in the past. So yeah, I'm mostly just coding from scratch on that front.
Gotcha. What editor do you use for
I
development?
usually use Sublime, and then when I'm testing, I use the Litmus Builder.
Gotcha. All right, so you copy paste from your local into Litmus Builder, test from there. That's
Mm-hmm.
cool. And then, so then you're doing a whole bunch of work in Marketo as well. That's like your de facto ESP that you're using.
Yeah, so we have we built out like drag and drop module email templates that we're hopefully going to be refreshing this year. But yeah, so that's what we currently use right now for building emails. So it's actually pretty fast for us, and we mostly have the content team build out their emails now because instead of them giving us stuff that they're not sure how it's going to look in email and having to do all the testing back and forth, they just put it in and they're like, oh, I want to edit this down, and takes some of the testing time out of it.
Gotcha. And so I guess as a team, how do you sort of manage the communication process and sort of the review, the approval, the project management aspect of the workflow?
We use JIRA. We're an agile team. So, because we're an agile based company. So, almost our entire marketing team is through JIRA. So, everything my team sees, we have a Kanban board. So, everything's like, okay, this is to do, defined, opened, etc. And that's how our content team works too. So, any of the copywriters, we can see when they're working on, if they're in progress, if they're reviewing it with a marketing manager, and then same for our email stuff, and then gets closed out once it's gone. And all of our communication is through JIRA. We just comment on tickets, ask for approvals, and everything. It's really smooth and easy.
Yeah.
Love it.
Especially if you're in a company that already has that established, it's pretty easy, I'd say, to extend that to email. But I can see how using JIRA would be maybe daunting, maybe for
Sure.
an individual email team outside of it. But JIRA can be very effective if you're using it properly, especially with sprint planning and in that system, which was, we didn't do that for email specifically when I was at Libbys, but the development team did and engineering team did. So yeah, it can be useful. What do you use for like, are you working off of briefs for certain campaigns, or do you have a certain type of template or document that you use depending on the type of email you're building?
Yeah,
or sending out?
we have ticket templates. So we've trained our marketing managers to fill out those templates when they open up email tickets for us, and then it's pretty straightforward from there. We do the project management for the content team. So we, create a ticket and we're like, here's the brief, here's the information about the email copy you're going to be writing. This is the email template we're going to be using. And they have Word doc templates that they just like fill in and then put into Marketo and give back to us.
That's cool. And so how big of a team is it that you're working on
So
for email? And then I guess you could just say in
bigger.
general.
Yeah, so there's 2 of us who do email. And then I work on an operations team that's of 6 because we work with the web team. And then the larger marketing team, I'd say we support about, I'd say 7 marketing managers and extended content team and stuff like that. I'd say the content team is like 6 people. So yeah, it's about like, 15 people-ish, 13 people-ish.
Cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is one thing that you would love to improve about your existing workflow? Like if you could change it up, make some enhancements, what would you do?
I want to be able to do more like dynamic and interesting layouts on the fly. I'd say that our current layouts are pretty like tired. We've been using the same one since 2017, so I think we're due for an upgrade. It's something I want to try to get accomplished, have more flexibility and more design elements built in that are more interesting. And I'm finally getting everybody to get on board with GIFs. We used to do GIFs all the time at Monotype, and they were super successful to us, but I've had to teach the content team how to make GIFs. So now we're finally going to get them, which I'm excited about. Feels so old school to be excited about GIFs, but it's a big deal for us.
No,
so I'm excited.
And plus, Outlook is going to be supporting
I know.
as well. So that's really awesome news. And
I was excited to see that. Yeah. Yay, finally.
It looks weird, though. It looks like it only loops once, and then it forces users to replay, which is kind of weird, but I don't know. We have to wait and see until it sort of officially gets out there a bit more and people get their hands on to test it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's good news. So more, I mean, that's legitimately the last client that's a holdout of supporting them. So
Yep.
yeah, and there's
big
a lot of
part of our database is Outlook, so it was always like, we'll put it off because we market to security professionals. So I was like, oh yeah, we'll hold off, and I'm like, now you have no more excuses. You got to give it to me. Thank you, please.
Yep. All right, so one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on today was to geek out about typography in email. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I just want everybody to know this show is sponsored by Email Tees, which is official apparel for email geeks. Fun project I've got going on. You can see I've got my paper airplane emblem hat here. Everything from hats, t-shirts, mugs, hoodies, socks, even pretty much head to toe. You can be covered in email geek attire. So upgrade your wardrobe in 2019. We just launched the Valentine collection, which features love-inspired designs, fun phrases like "you had me at hello first name," "you're the TR to my TD," just a bunch of geeky stuff. So, and I'm trying to use these funds to help fund this show here, other events, local meetups in Boston, just other content initiatives. So I'm trying to use that as a means to provide cool content for the email community. So I appreciate your support. Just go to emailtees.com or follow us on Twitter at emailtees and Instagram as well at emailtees. All right, so let's dive into typography here. So the reason I first kind of knew about you and your expertise in this space is when you gave a talk at Litmus Live this past year, all about typography in email. So I'd love to let's get into it. Like, what makes great typography in email?
Okay, it's there's so many ways you can go about it. It really depends on how you feel a good user experience is. I feel like I keep harping on that, but good type is an easy experience for anyone to get through your email and get what you're saying as quickly as possible. Email is an intimate form of marketing, but it's also a fast form of marketing. So you got to have really good design that gets your message across quick, easy, and well done, easy to read.
Yeah. And so what do you say to people like using web fonts? So using web fonts in email versus non-web fonts. When should you use images, not use images for typography? I'd love to get into that debate.
Use web fonts, please. Use web fonts. They render so well, and anyone will be able to read it, including like Alexa can read your email. Just use live text. I get the draw of using images of text because you can design emails a lot faster and get them out the door a lot quicker. But the accessibility and also the skill that went into actually setting the type in live text is just, it's nicer and it makes a better experience for everybody. Trust me.
Yeah. So that's encouraging to hear coming, especially from somebody with such a strong design background. But how do you try to educate or get buy-in to, because everybody's like, oh, we need to be on brand. This is our brand. And even Apple, I think, is the worst offender of this, to where all of their headlines and buttons are images, even though they don't look like it, but they make them super huge retina images. What do you say to people who approach it that way?
I say And I come from a background where anybody should be able to read anything you make. That's like a big thing about design is you're trying to make it for the lowest common denominator. If you're using images of text, you're losing people. And you're going to lose anyone. You're going to lose people who don't have fast internet speed, who can't download your images. You're going to lose people in Gmail, turn off their images, and Outlook. There are tons of people who don't look at images in email. You get caught in spam traps. It's just not a best practice anymore, in my opinion, because you're losing a bunch of people you could be talking to. And in terms of the design, there's so little web fonts can't do anymore, and we're getting more and more support that I just think it's going to make the best experience. And you can do a lot more with it. Like, you can make really cool dynamic things. You can do really interesting, like, different views on different systems, and you can do cool stuff when people forward it. It doesn't look so wonky. There's just a lot of good aspects of using live text. It was a huge push for us at Monotype, not just because we sell fonts, but because it was better for just in general for users. You're going to be able, it's going to be so much easier for them to read. They're always going to render better than an image. So even if Apple's using high retina images, there's going to be somebody who it doesn't load very well for. So that's just my general feeling for using images versus web fonts.
Yeah. And the ironic part being at Monotype, I'm sure you had to use a lot of images because you were trying to, showcase fonts, right?
We only used images for our header images.
Yep.
Everything else was live text. I was very, very passionate about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time for me would be is if you ever have a font that is just so bespoke. It's so unique that and if it's a part of a hero graphic of some kind, maybe, depending on how the design is laid out.
Yeah.
Which I would say maybe at that point it's you need to design it a little bit more
For
for
sure.
email. But that might be the only time I would make a trade-off. But I can't recall the last time I myself used like an image for text. It's been a while. I'm on.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you on there. I kind of wish we disagreed so we could debate more. But
if it's more like if you're more trying to make like a statement rather than communication, then I think that's totally cool. If you're trying to like showcase a specific character or try to do something cool and interesting with the typography that's way more dynamic, like showcase a date funky like 2019 or something, that's fine. You're not trying to like tell somebody to register for your event or buy something or whatever. And that's kind of the only time I'm like, oh yeah, you should for sure put that in live text. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Like something like 2019, especially if it's shorter too, you could always like slice that up and use styled alt text for images off you.
For sure.
I had that. I just did an email review for one of my past episodes. I think it was a Duolingo email, and that was my recommendation for something like that. So that could be potentially used.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say, with your experience designing with typography for emails, what are some big common pitfalls users can avoid when they're running into issues with, I guess, just typography for the design's sake, but then also the development implementation side of things?
Oh, yeah. I would say some of the things I notice are people make text way too small on mobile and put way too much stuff on a mobile email, not utilizing like hiding and showing stuff. And then in terms of like development, some of the biggest things I would notice are people, I think actually for design too, putting like tons of social media icons all over the emails. It's like superfluous. Like there's lots of people who've done tests and show nobody clicks those. But then also like for development, I would say it's really, for me, I've been working in tables for like 4 years now, so I understand all the tables can do, but I think for a lot of other developers trying to move away from tables, they just don't get it, and they need to figure out how to use them a little bit better and successfully. So yeah.
You mentioned mobile size. What would you recommend be sort of the ideal size for mobile?
Yeah, I'd say probably at least around 12 pixels or 14. Just like a good text size for like a book. Somebody's holding it in their hand just like a book. They're holding it about as far away from their face usually as a book. So whatever you would set a book size in, you should set your email text size into.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. I never really, at least for my personal ones, I never really go below 16 at this point, because I'm just, the older I'm getting, man, it's not getting any easier.
Yeah, you got to make it scrollable too. Like people are going to be like swiping through. They got to read it really quick.
Especially with bigger phones now too, right? You get a lot more real estate to work with. So
yeah,
if you have really small stuff, it's going to feel out of scale almost. So do you have some cool examples that you wanted to pull up and walk through to showcase some awesome typography and email design?
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen. And this is actually good, feeds back into using images of text versus live text, because this is a good combo of the two. So I would say that, here, let me pull this up. So yeah, this is from Hoffler & Co. They've designed some of the best fonts out there, like Gotham. They did all the work with Obama for his presidency and stuff like that. But they do really cool email, and they actually have, if you get a license with them, you can actually put their fonts in emails. They have an email license specifically. But yeah, this is an image, but it's very like graphical. This is not trying to tell you anything. It's trying to show you something. But the stuff that's trying to tell you something is all live text, which I think was like really successful. And then I love this like play button that doesn't take away from the type behind it. And then this is just beautiful. You have like a mix, it really sets itself apart, this gray background, but it also like you get these gorgeous letter forms, but this is all live text beneath it. So you really don't lose out on anything. This could be like the equivalent of like a t-shirt in a different kind of sales pitch, sales email, but you still get the usability. So I think they did a really good mix of the two, using text and images.
Yeah, definitely. And I always love, especially I feel like these typography newsletters, I feel like they always do such a great job of color blocking and the different colorways that they use throughout the email.
For sure. I love the block of this background feeds so well into like this gray that they used up here. So it's like it still feels like all the same, but not too much of the same. So I think they did a really good job with that. Yep. And then next I have this. It's like very different, but really gorgeous. This is all live text, and it's really decorative, but done really well. And then I think it's just super easy to read. It's a different twist on a Christmas email. It's not red and green. It's more like subtle. And I just think they did a really good job with the typography up here, especially when I found that this was live text. I was like, yes. Yeah. Oh, it just shows that you don't have to sacrifice good typography in an image. You can get it done with live text. So I really want that to be encouraging to everybody. And it would be super legible on mobile. I think they just did a really good job with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hadn't seen that one. I'm definitely going to swagger jack some pieces from that email. Like, I absolutely love the background design. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love the patterns. I'm a huge pattern person, so if you couldn't tell by my shirt. But I think that they just did a really great job because it doesn't distract totally. The typography still stands out on its own from the background.
Right.
And they still used an image for their logo, which is actually really good because that's really good for clicking through and the like actual accessibility of it. A logo should be an image rather than live text.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome because this email is going to stand out in the inbox. And like you said,
sure.
Even if you remove that background, it's still going to be a solid design.
Mm-hmm. It stands on its own and it works with the background, which I think is it's super hard. And it's reminiscent of like book design, which I think is crazy cool in an email. It doesn't feel super techy, but they did use good technology behind it and good coding. So I think that that's just a really interesting design. I really respect when somebody can accomplish that. And then the next one is a very designy, but very interesting piece. It is all about like accessibility, but what I really liked was that they put code in the email and like successfully like highlighted it out, and that they just treated this really well. It feels kind of like an educational book, which I think is really nice. Sometimes it can be really hard to kind of differentiate the two. I know when I was presenting at Litmus Live, I had to follow their like strategies for presenting code in slides. There's not really like a good standard for putting code, directional code into an email. And then I just loved that there was like, they included a little bit of, type anatomy in here. I loved that. I thought it was really successfully designed, and it's really educational and helpful. So I really liked this email. It's really super nerdy and typey. I love the basic kind of type design of it, but I think that it did a really nice job and shows you don't have to go super ornate like the last one to get a successful email to look good and convey your message.
Yep, that's one of Paul Airy's finest work there. That's one of his most popular emails. I love the code. It's actually one of my things. I need to hook up with somebody to do a side project to generate code blocks for email using different themes or styling the themes. That's one of those like hack, side projects I'd love to do. And then, there's the accessibility switcher as well in the top left where you can increase or decrease the font size, which is really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, so the SLC in the top left, you can click on those, and there's the contrast for the contrast mode, and then smaller or larger type. So
I didn't even notice that. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's a really
super
sick
cool
newsletter. I'm in the process of trying to add an accessibility switcher like that for all the emails I send out, which takes a bit of work though for getting it, to change all the elements across all the different components you could possibly have.
Yep.
That's really cool. So I'd love to talk to you about, so you presented all about typography at Litmus Live.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to talk to you about your experience, because this was your first time doing public speaking, if I'm being correct.
Yes, you are. I had never presented before, unless you count school, presenting my work at the end of every semester. So this was my only experience presenting. And so it was a really awesome experience. I was so crazy nervous. And I practiced a lot, and I went over my time when I practiced, but when I was up there, I went way faster. So
it's always the case.
That was crazy. And it was like awesome to get some laughs and talk, and people appreciating my nerdy font jokes about why Arial is terrible because it's a knockoff of Helvetica, and just all that good stuff. So it felt nice to be around people who would get that information that I was giving them.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what tips, tricks, advice would you give for people who are looking to, do their first speaking experience?
I would say it's okay to be nervous. Don't worry too much about being nervous, because that's natural, and I think you'll still appear natural when you're on the stage without realizing it. What's nervous to you, these strangers will have no idea, because for the most part, they won't know you at all. So you're just going to talk through something you're an expert on already, and focusing on the work rather than on the people or how you're saying it, you'll come off naturally and good. I said weird things when I was presenting, because I say things weirdly sometimes about fonts. Like I say serifs are little feet, and I can't help it. It's just how I learned. And I say that stuff and I don't even realize it until after, and someone tweeted at me and loved it, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that's great. Just be yourself, because it'll be totally fine.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I was in the crowd, I was in the audience. I didn't recognize or realize that at all from you. Did a great job, and it was one of my two favorite presentations that stood out to me from the two ones that I went at. So it was a great job, and that's great advice. And I think we may have to put serifs are little feet like on a t-shirt or something. We may have to We'll do like a Libby Herskovitz original, and I think
Thank you.
we may have to make that happen because that is pretty damn awesome.
Great. I love it. Sounds awesome.
So yeah, I'd love to just get into some of your favorites. So what is your favorite email that you've been a part of that you've designed and or built?
Sure. So it was an email that never got released. Per usual, I would say some of the things that I've spent the most amount of time on designing never even got out there. But it was a email inspired by a Taco Bell email that was parallax designed. And so it's a parallax scrolling. And
so I'm pulling this up now for people at home to see. So
nice.
I got this going.
Awesome. So yeah, it was for a sub brand of Monotype called Swift that did emojis for brands, and it's all an image because that was the way that I could get the parallax working, but we never really had an excuse to send this out by the time that it was all set and good to go. But I was always really proud of this. I designed it and came up with the marketing concept for it and everything all by myself, and the marketing managers loved it and really wanted to use it, but we never got to send it out. But yeah, I was always really proud of it.
That's really cool. Well, you're going to get the plug and promo from it now, so it was just waiting to be shared. That's awesome because I hadn't seen this. And yeah, I had Heidi on the show. She was my first guest for this show, actually. So that's really cool how we can help inspire each other to piggyback off each other's work. I mean, that's cool.
They did incredible work in that email. It was awesome. So I was super impressed with it. And I was like, oh, I got to try to do something like this, which is usually what happens with me. I see something I like and I break apart their code and try to make it my own.
Yep. So what's the favorite email that you have ever received in your inbox?
Okay. The recent one that I could think of was the Spotify 2018 best of, or your most listened to music and stuff. It inspired me to try to want to do more of that for our emails, do more like dynamic stuff in email that says like, okay, this is how much of something you've done. I loved that, and I thought it was really well designed. I think it didn't push too many boundaries, but I thought it was really well designed, and my head is usually in the marketing world now. But I think that they did a good job. It definitely stayed on brand for Spotify, which is a good sign of some classic design.
Yeah, and Spotify, I mean, they just have such a great brand. Like, their branding is awesome, right? Their color work, their typography, the unique image filter that they were able to come up with for all their different styles. It's just great to look at. And then when you can combine it with all the personalized data that they do, which it's oddly, people are oddly interested in their own music data for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, I think because people don't even realize how much they've listened to music, specific music, and they're like, whoa, I was really going through something back then when I was listening to that a lot. So yeah, but it's emotional.
That's a brand that I would love to do some work for, because I could do some cool things, I think, with some dynamic stuff and using their brand. That would be fun. Yeah. I'm sure you could too. So finally, what is your favorite newsletter that you subscribe to?
I love Action Rocket. I feel like a lot of people have been talking about their most recent email with the below above the fold test. I was one of their subjects. I tested it. I was anticipating the data to come back, so I was excited when I saw that. But just in general, I think that they do really cool stuff that I actually want to read. And then when you gave me this question, I was like, oh, what is an actual newsletter that I read? And I actually read that newsletter. I would say there's not too many other newsletters I read that aren't related to work. And I really like how they design it, and I think it's really successful, and it just keeps me wanting to see new weird stuff that they're going to do.
Yeah, they've definitely tapped into the email geek psyche and are completely captivated our audience. That was an interesting test they did with the fold. So what is your take on the fold, by the way, on the record? What do you have to say about the fold?
Well, I think that it is super interesting, and I liked seeing I mean, I come from a web design background too, so I care a lot about the fold. But I know that people scroll a lot in emails, so I'm not as worried about it, I think, because I know that it's like natural for someone to open up an email and instantly scroll it, rather than read the first line. So I just think it's interesting to see where the line actually lives on the different devices, because they like posted about that too. And there's big screens, so you have a lot more space to work with. I think that was the big thing that I picked up from that, is like, we're not working on tiny screens anymore. We're working on these big multi-inch big screens that are getting bigger and bigger. So it's not as big a problem.
Yeah, I thought the test, it was super interesting. I can't really take the results as being too valid or too serious, just because, I mean, it required a user input, a user click, which is just, there's just so much wrong there with that. If we were ever able to detect, or if email client supported viewport height as a unit property to where we could detect an actual viewport with images, then we'd really be able to detect it. But I thought the most interesting part about their findings that they came out with was that only 0.4% of people clicked on their fake view entire message, where they like faked a Gmail clipping, which went to show that there wasn't many people who would be interested in clicking on it if it was clipped.
That is true.
Yeah, and granted, depending on what environment you're in, you know, if you're in a desktop environment, it could have gone a long ways down, so you could even test it on shorter emails. But I think that was probably the most relevant one for us from the findings. But yeah, I have to say, it was really funny at first, but I'm starting to become more and more a believer of the scrolled that was mentioned at Litmus Lab by Holly, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that the scrolled, meaning there is a fold kind of, but users will scroll, but there is kind of a fold.
You just can't make them scroll that far.
It's a hybrid.
That's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, yeah, it's fine. They're going to naturally scroll a little bit, because for most people looking at a newsletter, it's on their phones. It depends on who you're sending to, but I'm like, yeah, naturally I scroll. My thumb's right there. I'm going to scroll. It's not like I'm on a mouse. So I don't think there's too much to fear about putting important stuff below the fold. But design can also encourage the scrolling. So you can try to emphasize that more too, like everybody does with their Instagram stories. Swipe up. You can do similar ideas with emails, especially if you're sending to a majority of mobile.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, Libby, thank you so much for taking time to come on today's program. This was really fun. Really enjoyed it. We'll have to have you back on sometime. Maybe talk about more typography stuff. I really enjoyed sort of the hands-on reviews we were doing. That was fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
So do you have anything that you want to plug for the audience, websites or links to visit or anything like that?
You guys can follow me on Twitter at Libby Herskovitz. I tweet random email things, random user experience things, and marketing stuff. So follow me there if you would like, but that's kind of it.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. Reminder, we go live every Tuesday and Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube. Give a subscribe below and go to kevinmandeville.com/newsletter to subscribe. Get the shows delivered to your inbox. And don't forget, get some email tees swag, emailtees.com, @emailtees on Instagram and Twitter. All right. We will see you next time, folks. Peace out.